Hello YouTubers, this is Cessnaace back again with another 10 video ads video. This time concentrating on the VHD video disc format, a format developed by the Victor Company of Japan, known outside of Japan as JVC. They had also developed the VHS video cassette format. They had announced in 1982 that they were going to be releasing the VHD format in both the US and the UK, and they had partnered up with several other companies to make discs and players. JVC went ahead and they built their own disc manufacturing facility in the US. Thorn EMI invested in building a new plant to manufacture discs in the UK, and then the decision was made to back out of releasing the format in the UK and the US. They still released it in Japan, where it has a cult following, and it really should actually have a cult following everywhere, because this format has quite a number of party tricks up its sleeve. This is, without a doubt, the most advanced analog format that was ever released to the market. First of all, while the discs superficially look like CEDs, albeit being 2 inches in diameter smaller and thus weighing less, that's where the similarity ends. CEDs have grooves, VHDs do not. CEDs wear out rather rapidly, VHDs do not. CED discs have grooves, VHDs do not. The grooves on a CED can become crushed if you have too much of a stack of CED discs, say more than 5. The discs on the bottom, you're going to wind up with crushed grooves, and then the disc will be ruined. I don't have that problem with VHD. With Laserdisc, initially they had a lot of quality control problems, and so a lot of the discs that were being manufactured either wouldn't play even before they got out of the factory, so they had to make them over and over and over and over again. On some titles, it cost MCA as much as $300 per disc to make, because the defect rate was so high. But even on discs that got out of the market, out of the factory, they could play perfectly and then 6 months later not play at all. Eventually that problem was licked, but you still had compatibility problems. The initial Laserdisc players used CAV, constant angular velocity, which gave the discs a maximum capacity of 30 minutes per side, but you could do all kinds of neat tricks like still frame, single frame access, perfect fast forwards and rewinds and slow motions and all that good stuff. Then about a year later they came out with CLV, constant linear velocity, which allowed an hour per side, unfortunately, without all of the neat little tricks that you could do with CAV. Later on, of course, they would come out with players that had digital buffers, and those could do CAV discs with CLV discs, but in any event, initially you couldn't do those kind of things with a CLV disc. CLV also had a problem with video crosstalk. So when Pioneer took over the format, they refined it and came out with something called CAA, or constant angular acceleration. Those were never called CAAs in the marketplace. Why, I don't know, because they were technically superior to CLVs. They just continued calling them CLVs. But a CAA disc will not have the problem with crosstalk that CLVs did, and you can customize the length or the running time of the disc. They came out with CAA 45s, and they came out with CAA 50s, and they came out with CAA 60s, which was the most common. But anything that ran under 50 minutes was typically on a CAA 50. Then they came out with CAA 65s, which could hold 65 minutes per side. And then they came out with CAA 70s, which could hold 70 minutes per side. But no one used those, not even Pioneer, and I just don't understand things like that. But anyway, this format has all of the functionality of CAA discs, but with a capacity of an hour per side. And the discs are smaller. Now, another neat little parlor trick that this format has is that it was designed so that discs made anywhere in the world could be played in players made anywhere in the world. Didn't matter whether the discs were NTSC, PAL, or CCAM, or whether the TV sets were NTSC, PAL, or CCAM. They were intercompatible. When you inserted the disc into the player, the two talked to each other and compensated accordingly, and so you wouldn't have intercompatibility problems the way you did if you tried to play, say, a PAL standard VHS tape in an NTSC standard VCR. What you would wind up with is a black and white picture and just static for your sound. But you didn't have that problem with VHDs. But as the format was only commercially released in the US, I mean not US, but in Japan, where they used NTSC, the same standard they use here in the US, that wasn't an issue. Although I do believe that they came out with some industrial discs in the UK. But in any event, you have that. You also have the parlor trick of 3D mode. Some players have 3D mode, some don't. Some discs have 3D mode, some don't. But the ones that do have a 3D signal on the disc, you could turn the 3D mode off and watch it in 2D just fine. There was also an audio-only counterpart to VHD. I'm forgetting off the top of my head what the initials were, but it was the only other format other than compact discs that were part of the digital audio standard. But that was the, as I said, the audio-only variation of the VHD format. Like I said, a lot of potential in this format that sadly didn't get used. As I believe I've mentioned already, this format has a huge cult following in Japan. It should have one everywhere else. What surprises me is that so far I have bought a total of 10 discs in 3 batches, and inside each batch I had at least one disc that was previously unknown. The Laserdisc database tracks Laserdiscs, VHDs, CEDs, digital VHS, HD, DVD, so forth. And in any given 2-week period, you're going to have at least 100 titles added to the database, even though there are well over 50,000 Laserdiscs now, and well over 1,100 VHDs. I'm rather surprised that I have come across 3 discs that weren't yet in the database. Now, one of the things the database tracks is the Hot 100, or the Top 100. The 100 most collected titles in that format, within that format. As I stated, I have 10 discs so far. There were over 1,100 releases that have been found so far. And of the 10 titles that I have, 9 are in the top 100. The 10th one might wind up that way, but it wasn't in the database yet, so I had to enter it in. And Julian hasn't updated it yet, so it's not in the database yet, even though I've submitted it. Well, in the last 2 days, he has added 100 Laserdiscs to the database. Anyway, as was the case with CEDs, the artwork on 2 disc sets sometimes were the same on each disc, and sometimes each disc had different artwork. This is a film I saw on Turner Classic Movies Runs 160 minutes, so it's on 2 discs. 55 days at Peking. It's pan and scan. It's in English with Japanese subtitles. And also stars, in addition to Charlton Heston, Eve Gardner, and David Niven. This is the other disc. Now, I have discs that take up, or titles that take up 2 discs that are in separate sleeves, and some that are in just one sleeve, designed to hold 2 discs, or 2 caddies. And what I've noticed is that on the releases that have 2 separate sleeves, they have 2 separate catalog numbers. For example, on this one, disc 1 has a catalog number of VHFV1011, and disc 2 VHFV1012. Color and stereo. This one is in Chinese with Japanese subtitles. It's Aces Go Places. Now, something I forgot to touch on is that, like Japanese released Laserdiscs, it seems to have been common for VHD releases to have inserts. Sometimes they could be rather basic, sometimes more elaborate. This was released, by the way, by Vestron Video International. Okay, this one was released by Toshiba. Okay. Why isn't that insert wanting to come out? No pictures, just text. Keep it from getting, well, put it in there with the caddy. Shouldn't be a problem with the insert punching up. Okay. This is another 2-disc release from MGM UA of the Charlton Heston film Ben-Hur. This release has 2 different covers. And 2 different reverse covers. This was obviously used, and there was no insert. So I don't know if it had one to begin with or not. Okay, this is a 2-disc set that's in one sleeve, released by Canon International. This is the Chaplin Review, which was released on VHS and Betamax in the US by Magnetic Video, at least initially. What I found interesting is they misspelled his name up here. It should be Charie, Chaplin. And this is part of a series, the Charlie Chaplin collection. This is volume 7. That short, by the way, The Pilgrim, was banned in some U.S. cities because it had the audacity to have Chaplin, a convict who had escaped from prison, trying to pass himself off as a priest or reverend, whatever. And the League of Catholic Decency, I think it was called, was very strong back then. This is why the motion picture industry adopted their own censorship I don't want to call it unit, but anyway, the Hayes office. Scripts and everything had to be submitted to the Hayes office for approval before they would shoot, because it was getting too expensive to make all these different versions for different towns and different cities. They'd have to take this bit out for Chicago and this bit out for New York and this bit out for Seattle, and so they went the self-censorship route. And then, of course, they went to the ratings that we have now. On the back of the insert is a Charlie Chaplin filmography in order of year of release, original release, beginning from in 1914 and then ending in well, it says 1977, but he was dead by then, I'm sure, so that must have been a retrospective of or something. But anyway, here's that. Okay, this title was not in the VHD part of the database when I bought it. I have since added it in there, and it is now in the top 100 for this format. So all the people who collect the VHD format on Laserdisc database, this is within the top 100. All the previous ones are as well. The Fangoria Video Magazine Volume 1 Tom Savini Special. Don't know if there were any subsequent volumes. They didn't know this volume existed, so I'm holding out hope that there were other volumes. This has a listing of all the chapters. The major expense of this format has not been collecting the discs, although I have had to have them all shipped from Japan. So you have, of course, the expense of doing that. The major expense for me was in the purchase and shipment of a VHD player from Japan. If you ever decide to do that, I would stick with the national brand players, as I've been told that the actual Victor brand players don't ship well. They work when they leave and they don't when they arrive. But my player works flawlessly, and mine's a national. This was another title that was not in the database yet until I bought it and then edited it. This has also become a top 100 title. It's a French sci-fi film, the title of which translates roughly in English as Fantomas is Unchained, or something along those lines. The world's only Flying Citroen DS. Well, if you took those wings off, it would still look like it could fly. This is in French with Japanese subtitles. It's in widescreen. They raised up the picture, and that gave them, whoever it gave, wider area of black to put subtitles over. So they're technically not in picture because they're in black. Apparently this film is part of a series that they had in France. Okay, this one was already in the database, but it wasn't. It was in the database, and it was already in the top 100. Let's see why. The Making of Star Wars as told by C-3PO and R2-D2, and Special Effects, The Empire Strikes Back. Each of those two programs taking up a side. The Making of Star Wars is the exact same release that came out on VHS. This is on the Magnetic Video label. Magnetic Video was the very first home video label. This has a copyright date of 1980 on it. The program was produced in 77. Magnetic Video started in 77. This might have been a reissue, but this is the original design for the artwork that Magnetic Video was using up until the time they were bought by 20th Century Fox. And that became their logo. I don't know if you can see that, but under where it says MVC, it says Magnetic Video, 20th Century Fox Company. After Fox bought Magnetic Video, they began transitioning to the name CBS Fox Video. And there was a period where they still had tapes, but they had run out of labels. And I think, well, somebody just put a CBS Fox tape in there. But no. You play this bad boy, and the first thing that comes up is the Magnetic Video logo, which is animated and was customized to fit each company they licensed titles from. Okay. Can't remember if I showed the insert to this or not, but what the hey. This, by the way, is in English with Japanese subtitles. Okay, now to one that I received yesterday. This is a 2-disc release. This is a movie, and so far it is the only title that I have managed to pick up used that still has the Obi strip. Murder on the Orient Express. Aha, I knew there was an insert. On the back, there's a rundown of the people that were involved, either behind the scenes or in front of the camera. Directed by Sidney Lumet, and then they have a section on him, starring Albert Finney, Lauren Bacall, Martin Balsam, Ingrid Bergman, Jacqueline Bisset, Jean-Pierre Gassel, Sean Connery, and John Gielgud. Third brief rundown of each. Japanese, naturally. I have a brother who thinks it's funny the way I say Hercule Poirot. That's how I say it. A character created by Agatha Christie, who she loathed. She loathes that character, but he has, over the years, become one of her more popular characters. This is one I had purchased earlier. It's a 2-disc release. The best dramatic telling of the sinking of the Titanic, as far as I'm concerned. A Night to Remember. In English with Japanese subtitles. Strangely, this is full screen, but I have it on VHS and widescreen from Hallmark Home Entertainment. So go figure. Oops. This this survey card flew out. I was trying to get out the insert, which is just single-sided, but still. This, as I mentioned earlier, was also common with Japanese Laserdisc releases, the inclusion of inserts. I don't know why American publishers didn't go the same route. But there you go. Okay, and finally, I have a title that was not yet in the database and is still not in the database, although it might be by the time you watch this video, depending on when Julian gets around to it. It's a Japanese film from 1985, and the title translates into English. The literal translation is Lost Chapter of Snow, Passion. And my understanding of the plot is it is about a girl who is adopted into a Japanese family and becomes their virtual slave until she is rescued by boyfriend, or her boyfriend. I've only watched enough of this to see that it was not defective, and it isn't. From Toho VideoDiscs, catalog number TVDV-1001. So this may be their very first VHD release. Can't remember if there was an insert on this one or not. And there is. If I can get it out. Side 2 starts really creepy. She is, it looks like she's in a chair, and she's moving in and out of frame, and she's like in a catatonic state. I understand this was a hit film when it was released in Japan in 1985. And according to the Laserdisc database, it was released on Laserdisc in Japan. VideoDisc VHD 10 count 1 up. I don't know what that means. Anyway, I have more VHD discs coming. I have Laserdiscs coming, DVDs coming, VCDs coming. I've got some video games actually that I've picked up. I haven't shown them yet, but I need to. So, whoa, this video's long. Until next time, stay awesome.